Hey everybody, it's Dr. Hyman. How you doing? I'm so excited to be here because I am about to talk to one of my closest friends, mentors, and really an icon in the whole field of wellness and health and trauma relief. And he's just such a beautiful man. James Gordon, I've known him for a long time. He's going to be joining soon. He's sort of an incredible guy. He's sort of this psychiatrist trained at Harvard, but has found a way to sort of bring together a lot of different approaches to health and well-being that are just so important, that have to do with inclusivity and healing and mind-body medicine. And he's just done incredible work over the world. A lot of people talk about stuff. He actually goes out in the world and goes to the hard places and does the hard things. Jim is going to come on real soon. As soon as I can find him coming on, hopefully he's going to come on soon. But he's just an incredible dude. He's written a book called Transforming Trauma: The Path to Hope and Healing. He's an expert in mind-body medicine and how to use mind-body medicine to help heal depression, anxiety, and trauma, psychological trauma, even other kinds of trauma. He's the founder and executive director of the Center for Mind-Body Medicine. And he's a clinical professor in psychiatry and family medicine at Georgetown Medical School. And he was the chairman of the White House Commission on Complementary Alternative Medicine, where I actually met him, which was many years ago when I testified in front of the White House Commission on Complementary and Alternative Medicine under Bill Clinton. So coming, it's going to be exciting. Holy cow, is it coming? This is always so, with some moments, is it working or not? There he is. Hey, Jim.
Hello, Mark. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. It's just COVID laziness is what it is. I don't like shaving. It's like, it's so bad. So I'm so excited to have you on, Jim. I was just giving people a little introduction about who you are. I'm going to continue that. I was just telling them about your background and how you've been doing incredible programs for mind-body medicine healing for doctors, for medical students, health professionals, people with cancer, depression, chronic illnesses, and you've worked all over the world doing really God's work where most people would fear to tread, where conflict is rampant, where natural disasters are just destroying the population and creating devastation. You go in there with your open heart and beautiful soul, and you help people. And you work with traumatized children and families in Bosnia and Kosovo and Israel and Gaza right now. There's so much conflict in Gaza. You're probably paying attention to that. You work with Syrian refugees. You've been in Haiti after the earthquake. You were down in 9/11 New York helping as well. And with Katrina, the devastation of Katrina in New Orleans, you really showed up and helped deal with the trauma there. You work with Native Americans, a great neglected group that you've gone and made powerful transformations of these populations in the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, where there's so much alcoholism and depression, suicide, and have had huge impacts on that just by the simple work that you do, which is deceptively simple. You work with veterans in the military, and you authored a book many years ago called Unstuck, Your Guide to the 7-Stage Journey Out of Depression. And today we're going to be talking about some of the work you're doing. It's really based on your new book called Transforming Trauma: The Path to Hope and Healing. So welcome, Jim. Good to see you.
Mark, thank you so much, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I was thinking as you were speaking, is that in a way it's very similar work that we may do, you may do, or others may do, or I may do with individuals, and work we do with whole countries or regions.
Yeah.
That when there's trouble, when there's dysfunction, when there's disorder, and things are in a state of crisis, that's actually a wonderful time to begin work, because people are so eager for healing. And that's what we respond to in all the different places that you've mentioned. And not only respond to the immediate emergency, but create sustainable programs in all those communities here in the U.S. and around the world.
Yeah, it's really important work, and I was in Haiti after the earthquake, and going to those places that are just ravaged by natural disasters or political upheaval or civil war and conflict. It's really difficult. And, I remember coming back from there having PTSD myself, just from being in an environment where there was such violence and chaos and death and destruction. And I think that I don't know how you do it, Jim. I really don't know how you do it, but you do it, and your work is just so important. Um, and today, so I want to talk about how did you go from a Harvard trained psychiatrist to doing what you're doing now? Because it seems like a quite a big gap between the traditional DSM-4 psychological work that you learned in medical school and residency to a really transformational, on the ground, in real life, in community interventions that take people out of their trauma and help people heal from really devastating experiences.
Well, it's a good question. I think, first of all, that psychiatry, modern psychiatry, is grounded in Freud and Breuer, Joseph Breuer and Pierre Janet's observations that troubled adults often had traumatic things happen to them in childhood, and that the symptoms that we or they manifest in adulthood come from that trauma. So it's really there in our training. We just don't pay so much attention to it. The other piece is I always questioned the top-down model of medical school and medicine. We've got the answers. We're going to do things to you to fix you, or for you. Now that works, obviously, and you know this as well as I.
Yeah.
A truck or we have an overwhelming infection, we need the doctor to be that authority doing things to. But for most of the problems that most of us have most of the time, that approach just doesn't work so well, which is why you do functional medicine. And it's
That's right.
I do.
So Jim, did you actually have an event or a trauma yourself that made you really want to do this work, or healing work that you had to do on yourself that made you realize that this is the life work that you were going to do?
Yeah, well, it came out of my own experience. I found medical school somewhat traumatic.
Oh boy.
What been in therapy at that time, and I worked with somebody whom I really admired, who was an inspiration to me. Some of our viewers may know Bob Coles.
Oh yes.
At Harvard, and he was then working with kids who were integrating the schools in New Orleans. The little black kids go through these crazed, angry mobs, and I loved what he was doing, and I wanted to work with him. But also, when I got into trouble myself, and I'm wondering, what am I doing in medical school? And I had a terrible breakup with my girlfriend. I started to see him partly because I thought he'd be a good therapist, but he was for me a role model. I wanted to work in the world. I love working with people individually in an office, but I wanted to have a much greater. And then little by little, I discovered things that I could do for myself, and also that my patients were a lot smarter and a lot more self-reliant and a lot more imaginative than we usually gave them credit for. So they could do things.
It's so important. And I think what you've done is you've taken all these insights and work you've done, and you've actually created a model, a program, a scalable model. And you really, as a doctor, I treat a patient, or maybe I'll do something in the community and do a group. But you've literally treated countries. You've gone, for example, Kosovo, and literally trained every mental health professional in this approach.
The trauma and the psychological disturbance is very widely distributed through, whether it's a whole country like, Haiti, which has been impoverished so long and which had so much violence, or for that matter, the United States after the pandemic. All of us have been traumatized by the pandemic. The studies show that 90% of Americans, adults, have some symptoms of mental distress, depression, anxiety, difficulty sleeping, increased anger, difficulty concentrating, all of those just in these last 15 months. So it's not just a matter of working with individuals, just the way in a war zone, the war affects everybody. It's not just somebody who's lost their father or their mother, the whole country's affected. So if we're going to really provide healing for individual people, we have to work with very large numbers, and we have to work with the major institutions in the society to provide programs for healing.
So Jim, you've gone all over the world doing these programs. I've heard your stories about Gaza. I've read about New York Times, about 60 Minutes, and your work is pretty unique and different than traditional psychotherapy or traditional talk therapy. It really sort of encompasses a wide range of modalities that seem to be kind of mostly neglected by traditional medicine, and yet so effective. And you've published, not even just you've done these programs, but you've published
I'm sorry.
peer-reviewed research showing that these work. So I said you published peer-reviewed research showing that these work, and I would love you to share a little
You
bit
froze
about the
for a minute
details of
there,
the
or I
programs that
froze.
you
Somebody
offer
froze.
at the Center for Mind Body Medicine. Okay, I can hear you, but sometimes it's wonky here. But I guess what I want you to do is share a little bit about what
I
is
don't know if you
the
can
kind of nuts and
hear
bolts
me,
of these
Mark.
programs that you've
You're
developed.
frozen. Will people be able to hear
Oh,
me?
I can hear you,
Look,
but
Mark, while
yeah,
you're,
I can hear you. I can hear
let me
you.
just go. You use a whole variety of modes, variety of forms. We use some written exercises where people can dialogue with their symptoms, problems, issues. We work.
I think we're back. We're back.
All of
I can
them
hear.
are the model. All of them are grounded in science and bring us back into balance physiologically and psychologically and socially. And when you bring them together in a comprehensive program, they're far.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
You're
Hmm. I think we're having a little technical problems here. I don't know if you can all hear me, but hopefully we're going to get Jim on a better network. Jim, can you hear me?
perhaps I should go on talking because you're still kind of
Mm,
frozen on the screen.
yeah. I think, Jim, it's your network connection. It's your connection. Yeah. So we're going to have you leave and come back and see if this works. But I just am so, if you all can hear me, put your thumbs up because I want to make sure you can all hear me. Okay, all the hearts. I guess you can hear me good. So Jim's going to get off and come back on. But the work he's doing is so critical to the world right now because we're all struggling with trauma. We're all struggling with whether it's just the stress of COVID and isolation and depression, or whether it's things like being in a war-torn country or in a country with natural disasters, or even in this country where there's things like wildfires and hurricanes and floods and huge disruption in our whole sort of ecosystem of our lives. And it's something we don't really get help with, is learning